It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And welcome to my listeners on WHP 580 in Harrisburg and WEJS 104.1 FM up in Williamsport. And to all of our friends on the iHeartRadio network, welcome. And we're going to talk about breaking news, the untimely death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, an Associate Justice on the United States Supreme Court. But before we do that, we want to announce that we're reporting live from the Cpac Pennsylvania 2020 conference in a place called Washington, Pennsylvania, south of Pittsburgh, that we Pittsburghers refer to as Little Washington, or more correctly, Little Washington, as we would say out here in Pittsburgh. And I'm here. It's a conservative conference with conservative talking heads and figures and politicians and celebrities from around the country who have convened here south of Pittsburgh to talk about the important political issues in the conservative movement. We're hearing a lot about how the Trump administration and President Trump and his campaign is fighting against the socialism of the Democratic nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden. But I'm here with a big shot in the Cpac organization, our friend Charlie Giroux from Harrisburg. You all know him as the CEO of Quantum Communications, a political consulting and public relations firm in Harrisburg. But he also is a conservative stalwart and a figure in the conservative movement, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the country. He sits on the board of Cpac, and he's helped put this organization here today. Welcome, Charlie Giroux.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's great to be with you. And I want your listeners to know how well you live, because we are in the lap of luxury as we broadcast here. This studio that you have found here in Washington, PA is really amazing. I'm kidding, folks, because we're literally, I think, right behind the porta potties in a little alley broadcasting over our phones. But it's great to be here in God's country on a gorgeous day with hundreds of activists from Southwest Pennsylvania in an area that historically has been very Democrat, but which now, because of Donald J. Trump, is passionately for the president and his reelection. We heard today, for example, from the head of the Boilermakers Union here, the largest Boilermakers Union in the world, headquartered in Pittsburgh, and their leadership endorsed President Trump, the first Republican they've ever endorsed for president. And they were outnumbered today, as are an awful lot of the good people here in southwestern Pennsylvania, Mark.
And now, Charlie, for our listeners, describe what is Cpac and what you're doing with the Cpac 2020.
Well, a lot of folks know Cpac because we meet annually in Washington, D.C. in February or early March. It's the largest political gathering in the country, except for the two-party conventions, but they only occur once every 4 years. We get somewhere between 14,000 and 20,000 people at that event. It's a three-day conference at the Gaylord Center just outside of Washington, D.C. And what we've decided to do in 2020 is to take Cpac on the road and to the various, quote-unquote, battleground states that are going to determine the 2020 election. And obviously, our home state of Pennsylvania, with its 20 electoral votes, is really the big prize among those battleground states that are up for grabs this fall. So being here in the part of Pennsylvania that's going to swing the tide for President Trump was very, very important for us.
And I see here you're featuring some statewide politicians, Heather Heidelbaugh for Attorney General, Stacey Garrity for Treasurer here in Pennsylvania. Sean Parnell, I believe, is going to be here in a little bit, who's running for Connor Lamb's seat in the United States Congress, a very important, pivotal swing seat out here in the Southwest. But Charlie, the larger message, the overall theme of the conference is America versus socialism. Why did you choose that as the theme for this conference?
Because we believe, Mark, that that's really the defining issue of the 2020 campaign. You have America on the ballot, and America, frankly, is represented by what President Trump is doing and what his administration has done, and socialism is represented by the Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden wing of the Democrat Party, which, frankly, has abandoned its moorings. And an awful lot of Democrats are now saying, we're going to vote for President Trump this time because we don't want socialism as it's being pushed upon us by some in the Democrat Party.
Now, Charlie, I only have about 2 or 3 minutes left, but I don't want you to leave without you letting our audience know about the importance of southwestern Pennsylvania in this upcoming general election. You're a political consultant. You've been reading the polls. A lot of people go to you for advice on political campaigning. You've talked about how important the Keystone State is this fall, but we're here in southwestern Pennsylvania. So what should we be looking for coming out of southwestern Pennsylvania, we Republicans who want to see Donald Trump win in the fall?
Well, I think, Mark, you've really put your finger on the key to success in November's election, and that is what's going to happen in this particular part of Penn's Woods. You know, the Philadelphia suburbs, frankly, have not gone well for President Trump. I think they're going to do better for him this time around than they did in 2016 for a variety of issues. Maybe we can discuss that at some other time. But this November, I think that you're going to see a tremendous uptick from the really good performance that President Trump had here 4 years ago. You're going to see an improved situation over even a really good start that he had 4 years ago. And I believe this corner of the state is going to carry the whole Commonwealth for President Trump, and that's going to propel him to victory overall.
So, Charlie, are you thinking that Pennsylvania is going to go for President Trump this fall?
I am very bullish on President Trump's prospects in Pennsylvania, and I'll say right now, flat out, yes, I think Donald Trump is going to carry Pennsylvania this fall.
Oh, that's wonderful news to hear, even with the mail-in ballots, the litigation, the Green Party candidate being knocked off the ballot here in Pennsylvania, making it much more difficult for Trump this time around.
Mark, you know better than anybody, because you've been involved in a lot of these legal fights, how hard the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania has tried to put its thumb on the scales, and they did it again this week. But despite all of their efforts, ultimately the voters are going to prevail, and they will vote for Donald Trump on November 3rd, and hopefully a lot of people will opt to be VIPs, voting in person.
Well, you heard it right out of the mouth of Charlie Giroux, our expert on polling, politics, and all things campaign related. He is going to continue this Cpac 2020 tour across the country. He's visiting other cities and states. And it's nice to know that we have a nationally renowned figure in the conservative movement right here in our own back of the woods in central Pennsylvania. Charlie Giroux, thanks for joining us on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Great to be with you, Mark, as always.
All right. Well, we're going to take a very brief commercial break.
Now, more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is the place where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And you heard from Charlie Giroux, the CEO of Quantum Communications. He's also on the board of the American Conservative Union that puts on the annual conference Cpac, which is just about the most important conference for conservatives across the country. It's typically held in Washington, D.C., but now they are starting to take that conference on the road, and they brought it here to southwestern Pennsylvania, where the show, the Mark Scaringi Show, is coming to you live from Washington, PA, south of Pittsburgh. And this is a very important region, as Charlie was pointing out in the first segment of the show. It's very important for Donald Trump, if he's going to win Pennsylvania, he's got to do real well here in the Southwest. There are lots of blue-collar Democrats, as they are referred to, who are listening intently to Donald Trump's message. And they don't like what they're hearing from Joe Biden when Joe Biden talks about the Green New Deal, when Joe Biden talks about shutting down fracking. That hurts the employment and the jobs of these blue-collar Democrats here in the Southwest. Washington, PA, which has been economically depressed for decades. When I was growing up here in Pittsburgh in the 70s and 80s, has had a resurgence with the natural gas and the Marcellus shale exploration and development, and it's booming now, and it's wonderful to be here. There's so much dynamism and business growth and opportunity here, and it would be a shame if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris get elected and they'll shut down the fracking industry, and that will just harm the Pennsylvania economy greatly. So we're glad that they're at the Cpac conference. They're featuring speakers who are really presenting the perspective. And we heard from, as Charlie was pointing out, we heard from a pipe fitters union leader, and how typically you would associate the union with the Democratic Party, and how they're for the Republicans and they're for Trump. They're for President Trump because President Trump wants to continue to develop natural gas and fracking in the oil industry, and the ancillary effect is on all kinds of jobs, workers who don't work directly in those industries, but like the pipe fitters work in building the pipes that get the natural gas from point A to point B. So there's a lot of ancillary, secondary economic development from these the natural gas and the oil industry here. Very important to southwestern Pennsylvania and to Trump's electoral prospects. So that's what we're hearing a lot about here in the Cpac conference. But we've had breaking news from last night, and that is the passing away of United States Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, referred to as the notorious RBG. May she rest in peace. And President Trump put out a statement earlier today referring to Justice Ginsburg as a titan of the law, nominated by then President Bill Clinton in the first year of his first term as president, as the second woman after Sandra Day O'Connor to serve on the United States Supreme Court. Now, Justice Ginsburg had a brilliant legal mind, as the president correctly pointed out in his statement, and she was known for her very strong, sometimes rather stinging dissents. However, she was a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, progressive, bent upon using the power of the judiciary to reform the republic into what she believes it should be, rather than how, in my view, our framers of the Constitution intended for it to be. So there are lots of sympathies and condolences going out to her family, prayers for her and her family, and of course that is appropriate. And it's good to see Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives coming together to express their grief at the loss of a truly great figure in American government and American history. President Trump himself pointing out she was a titan.
Let's get back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. And this is the place where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And sorry about that rather abrupt ending to the second segment of the show. I'm out here doing the show remotely, trying to do it here in Washington, Pennsylvania at the Cpac 2020 conference. It's a conference of leading conservative figures from across the country who are here in southwestern Pennsylvania making the case for America versus socialism. further making the case for the reelection of President Donald J. Trump. And they're talking about the actual dynamics here in Pennsylvania, and more particularly in southwestern Pennsylvania, how it's so important for President Trump to do as well and better among blue-collar Democrats as he did in 2016, and with former Vice President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris talking about ending fracking and shutting down the natural gas industry, essentially. That is reverberating well for Republicans and for Trump among a lot of these blue-collar Democrats, some of whom we've been hearing from at this conference. We've also been talking about this breaking news with the passing away of Associate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And there are lots of tweets and Facebook postings and lots of news articles about the brilliant legal mind, the strong character, and the career of this remarkable woman, no question. As President Trump referred to her, she's a titan of the law. But, known as an advocate for women. And so she's getting lots of laudatory comments and accolades, and all of that, I think, is appropriate and well-deserved and well-earned. On the other hand, if you look at her record on the United States Supreme Court, and if you look at the particular jurisprudence that she used as a sitting justice, I have to come to a very different conclusion about her legal career, at least on the bench of the United States Supreme Court. As I was saying, she was a dyed-in-the-wool liberal progressive, and she used the power of the judiciary to reform the republic into what she believes it should be, rather than how our framers intended for it to be. So let me explain why I say that. She rejected one of the foundational bases of our Constitution, which is that it protects negative rights, that is, the right against state infringement of our fundamental God-given rights as citizens. So while she's also criticized the United States Constitution for that very reason, and while criticizing the United States Constitution because it protects negative rights, she has lauded or applauded those of countries such as Egypt and South Africa because they incorporated the liberal positive rights doctrine, which is antithetical to the founding principles of our framers. So through her liberal progressive positive rights jurisprudence, some would say ideology, as would I, the conferred constitutional rights upon things advanced by her liberal progressive agenda. So here are some examples of what I mean by that. She voted for the majority in some of the worst decisions in the modern era, including Obergefell v. Hodges. That is the case which declared states' traditional marriage laws unconstitutional and established the constitutional right to same-sex marriage. Now, of course, there had never been a right to same-sex marriage in the history of our country, nor had there been a right to same-sex marriage in the history of human civilization. Yet Ruth Bader Ginsburg was able to find a right to same-sex marriage buried somewhere hidden in the 14th Amendment, buried somewhere hidden in the Equal Protection Clause. The Equal Protection Clause, the component of the 14th Amendment, which was one of the post-Civil War era amendments, had nothing to do with same-sex marriage. At the time, in the 1870s and 1880s, late 1860s, when the Equal Protection Clause and the 14th Amendment were being debated and ratified, sodomy was a crime in probably all of the states. So it's there just is no such thing as a right to same-sex marriage protected by the Constitution. So if you're Ruth Bader Ginsburg and you want to find that right, even though it's not in the document, you use this kind of positive rights theory, and she actively found a right that doesn't exist in the Constitution. And so that's why conservatives have criticized her jurisprudence. In the United States versus the Virginia Military Institute, she voted to strike down VMI's all-male admission policy. She used the Equal Protection Clause again on that to do the job there. The Equal Protection Clause, again in the 14th Amendment, that was written to ensure equality between Black Americans and white Americans. The framers of that particular amendment did not intend for it to be interpreted in such a way that it was used to strike down and end all male admissions policies at military schools, but that's what Ruth Bader Ginsburg did with the 14th Amendment. She voted against the majority in D.C. v. Heller, attempting to deny the individual right to keep and bear arms guaranteed by the Second Amendment. So here is a right, unlike the right to same-sex marriage, unlike the right of women to be guaranteed admittance into an all-male educational institution. Unlike those rights, this right, the right to bear arms, does exist in the Bill of Rights in the United States Constitution. So that would be one that she should focus on. It's easier to strike down laws or it should be easier to strike down laws that infringe upon the Second Amendment, or to find that the Second Amendment is to be protected in law. But she couldn't. In D.C. v. Heller, which is a landmark decision, she was with the dissent. So it was the majority that declared the individual right to keep and bear arms is guaranteed by the Second Amendment, but not so according to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was a champion of abortion rights. She joined the majority in a case striking down Nebraska's partial birth abortion ban. And she voted against regulating abortion providers to protect women's health in the case Whole Woman's Health v. Hellerstedt. She voted with the majority in a decision to uphold Michigan Law School's affirmative action admissions policy in Grutter v. Bollinger, thus supporting discrimination against white Americans. This is another example of Justice Ginsburg distorting the original meaning and understanding of the Bill of Rights in the Constitution to find that it protects a policy that it was never intended to protect. The affirmative action policy that discriminates against white Americans in favor of whatever special class of Americans the policy supports, usually Black and Hispanics, it cannot be considered by any rational person to be an example of equal protection of the law when the policy itself treats blacks and whites unequally. Nevertheless, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, was able to find that affirmative action policies do not violate the Equal Protection Clause. So that was just a handful of examples of some of the more important cases that she voted in the dissent in a way that distorted the original meaning and understanding of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, or she voted in the majority in which she discovered rights that had never existed before. And so for those reasons, she has received a lot of criticism over the years from constitutional conservatives. And since the theme of this show is constitutional conservatism, I thought I would spend some time talking about the actual jurisprudence of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, So, yes, we can express grief for her death. We can express our sympathies and condolences to her family and to her friends and to her colleagues on the bench. We can talk about she had a brilliant legal mind. There's no question about that. If you've ever read her opinions, she is as sharp as a tack, and she really had a profound grasp of the law. But you can also point out that you differ with her particular jurisprudence. We're always told that one's personal opinions or judges' personal opinions should not impact on how they reach decisions as judges. Yet this justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, before she came on the bench, she was a women's rights advocate. She headed up a special committee in the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, to promote women's rights. So she was also a strong advocate for abortion rights. So she came at her position on the bench through a career of political/legal activism as an activist. And so, of course, that was her personal philosophy. That was her personal belief system. That's what she had been dedicating her life to, advancing these particular rights. And when she got on the bench, she did just that. But now she had much more power because she was a sitting United States Supreme Court justice. So when people tell you that we can't nominate or we can't support people who judges for the bench because we're afraid they're going to allow their personal political beliefs to influence the manner in which they do their job in deciding cases. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is an example of someone who did just that. Now, there's a lot of talk about one more thing on Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And you don't want to be too hard on a person who has just passed away, but she did inappropriately engage in politics as a member of the United States Supreme Court. Remember when Donald J. Trump, then candidate Trump, was running for office, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg referred to him as a faker, and she threatened to move to New Zealand if she got elected. Now, those statements are entirely inappropriate from a sitting associate justice on the United States Supreme Court. She is obviously telling the entire nation exactly what she thought of then candidate Donald J. Trump. And she is supposed to be impartial and above the fray, above politics. When you read an opinion from a federal court judge, often when they refer to the three branches, they will talk about the judiciary as being the non-political branch. The legislature, of course, is obviously political in that its members are elected into office by the voters. The president is obviously political. He or she is elected into that office by the voters, or actually the Electoral College. But the judiciary, the federal judiciary, is not. Those members of those courts are appointed, not elected. So it's considered the non-political branch. And I think that's a good thing, and that's the way our system is structured. And has been for a forever with the executive and the legislative branches. In the state courts, we have state-elected judges, which is different from the federal courts. But anyway, the point is this. She is supposed to be non-political. It's very important. The President of the United States is the chief executive officer, the chief magistrate of the executive branch. He has a Solicitor General who appears before the United States Supreme Court. He has an Attorney General who is the leader of the Justice Department for the entire federal government. He has U.S. attorneys all across the country litigating cases, trying cases before the federal courts. At the tip top of the federal judicial system is the United States Supreme Court. What it says in its opinions is the law of the land and binds all courts and all people to its opinions. And there is she sitting on that court while a presidential election is occurring, casting aspersions on one of the candidates, calling him a faker, and saying that she'll move to New Zealand if he is elected. And Trump was, of course, much chagrined by those comments, and they were entirely inappropriate comments. So you want to keep her legacy, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy, in perspective, and she must be judged by those comments as well as the judicial opinions that I have highlighted. I think that she has done, although a brilliant mind, a great lady, she's done a lot of damage to our constitutional republic through her jurisprudence, which went against what our founding principles are, which is that we are a country, and our Constitution is based upon negative rights, meaning our rights are against the state. The government cannot take away our God-given fundamental rights. She believed in positive rights, that rights come from legislatures, rights come from government. And so government can create as many rights as it wants. The right to same-sex marriage, the right to health care, the right to housing, the list goes on and on. It's endless, but it's diametrically opposed to the principle upon which our judicial system and our laws were founded and carried out for much of the history of this country. So just keep that in perspective, I say to my dear listeners, when we talk about the legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, President Trump, by the way, has been, I think, very appropriate in his comments toward her passing. And we'll see how, and he will now, his attention will certainly be pulled in the direction of choosing her replacement. But I will tell you one other thing, and that is, according to the National Public Radio, just days before her passing, Ruth Bader Ginsburg dictated the following statement to her granddaughter, Clara Spira. "My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed." Apparently that was the deathbed wish of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so I give this to you as one last example before I move off this topic. You're probably bored of hearing about it. Of just one more example of Justice Ginsburg interjecting herself into politics. The fact that she would say that on her deathbed, that she doesn't want the incumbent, the current president, to be the one to nominate her replacement. She wants to wait until a new president is installed. That's telling the country, those who support her or those who believe in her, obviously, to vote against President Trump. She's telling you she doesn't want President Trump to nominate her successor. That is completely inappropriate, for a member of the United States Supreme Court to inject herself like that into our presidential political process. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what's coming up in the United States Senate as far as what the president will do. Will he nominate someone to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Will the Senate take out the nomination, or will the Senate punt and defer until the next Senate is sworn in January? We're going to hear more about this when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to the Mark Scaringi Show.
Now back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is the place where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. You're welcome to call in at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. We're here in southwestern Pennsylvania, so you're listening to the Mark Scaringi Show live remotely. We're here in Little Washington, PA, at the Cpac 2020 conference, where we're hearing from political leaders, figures from the Cpac conference, elected officials, those candidates who are running to become elected officials. Diamond and Silk are here. You've probably seen those two ladies who rose to internet fame, or rose to YouTube fame with their hilarious interpretations of the political issues of the day and how they're great fans and supporters of President Trump. So they're always a lot of fun. Sean Parnell, who's running for the United States Congress out here against Connor Lamb, who's the darling of the of the Democratic Party. Sean Parnell is trying to defeat this Connor Lamb, and that would be a watershed electoral victory if he's able to do that. And we're also talking about the legacy of Associate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed away yesterday. We've talked a lot about her career and her particular jurisprudence. You've heard my views. You may have different views, and you're welcome to them. You're welcome to share them with the audience. You're welcome to call at 717-540-0580 and let us know what you think about the life and legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court, who passed away yesterday. Now, of course, the political world has exploded. This is just about the biggest thing that happens. The death of a Supreme Court justice is almost as big as the death of a sitting president. It really is. And that's not a good thing. That tells you how powerful the federal judiciary, how powerful the United States Supreme Court has become in the lives of the American people. And that's not necessarily a good thing, but I guess, it's reality, and it's something that we have to deal with. And President Trump and the Republicans in the Senate are apparently prepared to deal with just that. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, well, he's promised that he'll hold a vote on the floor of the Senate for President Trump's nominee. Now, of course, this has enraged liberals. They're bringing up the Merrick Garland issue, and you may hear friends, neighbors, others who might be of a different political persuasion than most of the listeners of the Mark Scaringi Show, except for a few who regularly call in. The Merrick Garland issue, you'll recall, or may not, Republicans in March of 2016 refused to consider former President Barack Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland to the High Court following the death of the great Justice Antonin Scalia, saying that it was too close to a presidential election. And by the way, before I continue on the issue of Merrick Garland and the nominee that the president will put up to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one lovely anecdote about Ruth Bader Ginsburg is her apparently strong and intimate friendship with the former justice, now deceased, Antonin Scalia. and they were best friends. It was a remarkable relationship between the two of them. Polar opposites politically, very different in their personalities. Justice Scalia was outgoing, verbose. He was the life of the party, a joke teller. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg was quiet and demure and private, soft-spoken, very, very gentle in her demeanor. So polar opposites, not just in their jurisprudence, not just politically, but polar opposites in their personalities, yet the best of friends. And so I think that's one of the great attributes, great components of the legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a woman who was obviously driven for her entire life and got into important positions, including just about the most important position as an associate justice on the Supreme Court, through which she advanced her political ideology and her political cause. So something that she felt very, very strongly about. Yet she was able to have a wonderful, strong, and close friendship and relationship with the man who was on the polar opposite, on the opposite side of just about every major political legal issue of the day. And their policy or political legal disagreements are not just those between friends, where they'll get into disagreements about politics, and in the end, it doesn't really matter because they're not members of the Supreme Court. But Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg were on the Supreme Court, and so their disputes, their legal disputes, ended up mattering greatly to the American people. But anyway, I just think that is kind of a lovely attribute of the life and legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that she was able to have such a warm relationship with a man who was her polar opposite in so many ways. But in any event, and by the way, you're welcome to call in 717-540-0580. Let me know what you think about the life and legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the remaining minutes that we have. So the Merrick Garland issue that I'm sure you're going to be hearing about from friends and family and others, that Republicans refused to consider Merrick Garland, who was then President Barack Obama's nominee to the High Court following Scalia's death, because Republicans said in 2016 it was too close to a presidential election. And to reassure Democrats in the media, United States Senator Lindsey Graham, who, by the way, now is chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, said during that Merrick Garland fight, he said, I want you to use my words against me. If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say Lindsey Graham said, let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination. And that's Lindsey Graham's full quote. That is a problematic quote for him, hopefully not for the Senate majority. Graham saying that if there's a Republican president in 2016, which there is in 2020, and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, which there has, you can say Lindsey Graham said, let the next president, whoever that might be, make the nomination. So let's hope that Lindsey Graham changes his mind, because he is chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the nomination has to come out of that committee onto the floor of the Senate. Now, apparently, a few years later in 2018, he doubled down. Lindsey Graham said during a forum with the liberal news media company, The Atlantic, he said, I'll tell you this. This may make you feel better, but I really don't care. If an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process has started, we'll wait until the next election. He's talking about taking up a nomination to fill a vacancy on the Supreme Court. That doubling down in 2018 is not good for us. So let's again hope that Lindsey Graham changes his mind, doesn't about face. Now, President Trump just tweeted, I think about an hour or so ago, a tweet to the country, but also tagging the Republican National Party. And President Trump said, we were put in this position of power and importance to make decisions for the people who so proudly elected us, the most important of which has long been considered to be the selection of the United States Supreme Court justices. We have this obligation without delay. And that's the tweet of President Trump, who's saying, look, this is our obligation. I'm the president. We control the Senate. We Republicans, we have to select the next United States Supreme Court justice, and we must do so right away. And by the way, the Senate is capable of doing a quick, short confirmation process. Don't think it has to last forever. John Paul Stevens was confirmed in 19 days, Senator O'Connor in 33, and Justice Ginsburg herself in only 42 days. And I think there are about 44 days until Election Day. So there's no reason why the Senate can't get this done. And let's hope that the president moves forward quickly in nominating one of the great individuals on his list. And the Senate moves just as quickly to confirm. And let's put a constitutional conservative on the bench of the United States Supreme Court. That'll be a great day for the Republic. That's all the time we have here. I'm broadcasting from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Thanks for listening. That's the Mark Scaringi Show, and have a great weekend.